Welcome to another episode of Effortless Coding. My name is Sam, and as always, I'm glad that you've joined us in this new episode. Today, we're going to talk about phpMyAdmin. Now, for those people who've seen our introduction to MySQL, we talked about how it's a relational database management system and how it helps us store information that comes through our web form or online form. Remember, we're focusing on online programming languages. Now, in this particular episode, we will delve into an open source software that helps you administer MySQL, and it's called phpMyAdmin. It's actually a graphical user interface. For advanced coders, most of them normally use command line prompts on shell or terminals, but as a beginner, it's always good to start with what we call a graphical user interface. And the best open source software that will help us do that is the phpMyAdmin. Now, by now, I'm sure you've installed your XAMPP server, or if you're using LAMP or whichever environment that you installed in your machine that will simulate a server. I'm sure you've done that. So I want you to go and access, the way we always access localhost. So type, as you can see on my screen, type http //localhost, and after that type phpMyAdmin. So it's actually an installed application. Whenever you install XAMPP or WAMP, this comes automatically. You don't need to install differently. So just type http //localhost/phpMyAdmin. Now I want us to look at a database in this case. I had already talked to you about a database being more of a storage, but now in a practical way, when we are arranging our database or when we are planning our database, I want you to look at it as a house that has different rooms within it. So there are elements that you need to know before we go into the deeper aspects of phpMyAdmin. Now the first thing is a database is a set of a collection of data where you're going to collect all data and store. But when you're storing data, even in your own house, you have a shelf that belongs to probably the eggs. There's where you store sugar, salt, and all that. You don't all just mix them all. So in a database, it's similar. It's actually similar to that, where you have the whole database. Then within it, you have different tables that have related information, that store related information. Then within the tables, you have what we call columns. Columns basically define data that are of the same kind. So if you're talking about your name, you will create a column called name. The way you have a spreadsheet, a very simple spreadsheet. A very simple spreadsheet can have the table. Then you can have those columns that have name, where you have all the names, the entries. And then you have age and all that. So those are called columns. Then also within that database, we have rows, and rows are also called tuple or entries, right? Or a record. Now, basically what rows do, an empty table does not have any row. But if you've inserted data in a table, you'll have different rows that contain information. So if, for example, you're storing information about myself, you'll say my name is Samuel Baraza, my age is so-and-so. So that is called a row, where it has an entry or a record of a specific kind of data. So just to define what all these elements are, we've said a database is a collection of tables with related data, as I said. Then when it comes to a table is more of a matrix of data that contain information that are related. A column basically contains data of one and the same kind, right? Remember the example of the name, it will have only the names. That is a column. And when I talked about the rows, we talked about entries or the records. So anytime you insert more information about different people, then those become rows, or we can call them entries. Imagine that spreadsheet that you have. For those people who've never interacted with spreadsheet, just imagine entering data of different people. So every data you enter is a row. Every data you enter is a row. So if you have 5 people that you have to store information about, those will be 5 different rows in this particular table within this database. So I hope you've understood the concept of a database. The database is a house. The table are the rooms within the house. So you can have the bedroom, you can have the toilet, you can have the kitchen, you can have the sitting room, you can have all these rooms that you have in your house. And then the columns define basically that place where you say, now in this particular room, or rather if this is the storage, I will have sugar only in one particular shelf. Then in the next shelf, I will have salt or different types of, spices and all that. So basically, in terms of an analogy, that is what a database is: a table and a column. And as I said, rows basically denote the entries that you enter in that particular table. If a table is empty, it does not have any rows in it. But if you fill data in any table, then it begins to have the different rows. And as I said also, a row is called a tuple, or an entry, or a record. So you can use those words interchangeably. So to create an application that stores data successfully in a database, we need all these the four elements within the database. You must create your database, you must create a table. Within that table, you must create the columns, and those columns must have provision for the rows. Without all these, you cannot store data in any database table. So make sure that you have that in mind. Now, for purposes of this particular tutorial, we are going to use phpMyAdmin because we said we want it to be as beginner friendly as possible. Maybe later on we'll have some advanced lessons where we'll now, tackle MySQL from a command line point of view. We can use Linux, or we can use whatever shell that we want to use. But for purposes of this tutorial and this series, we'll use phpMyAdmin, which is a graphical user interface that will help us administer MySQL. So as I said, I want you to go through. Remember when we started, I said you type http://localhost/phpMyAdmin. Now, whatever you're seeing even on my screen right now, that is phpMyAdmin. You can see on the top menu, we have databases, we have SQL, and all these other menus that you can see on my screen. Basically, this helps you create databases very easily because it's a graphical user interface. Yeah, so graphical user interfaces basically help us, just to navigate in an easy and friendly way, and also save on time. So imagine a specific place where you're supposed to travel to. Normally, you might be taking 7 hours drive. For example, Mombasa to Nairobi. If you drive, you might take 6 to 7 hours. But now, if you use a plane, you might take actually like 1 hour or 1.5 hours at most. So basically, a graphical user interface, in this case phpMyAdmin, helps you save on time because you don't need to type all those commands to be able to create a database or to be able to create a table or the columns. Those different functions and the menus that are within the phpMyAdmin, as you can see on my screen, that will actually help you facilitate the launch of, or rather the creation of a database, creation of a table and all that. So take that in mind, but that does not mean that in phpMyAdmin we cannot use statements, or rather the hard coding. So in as much as we'll be using phpMyAdmin, I will refrain from using the shortcuts in creating tables and creating databases. Instead, we are going to use the commands themselves, so that even when you get an environment like a terminal, when you're dealing with Linux and all that, you will still be able to type the same commands. But just know we are using phpMyAdmin in this case, but we'll still be using the commands, the same commands you'll use on a terminal. So take note of that, but I'll be showing you those two different ways. So if it's to create a database, I'll show you the shortcut way, or rather the easiest way by using the GUI, and also I'll show you how to use the command syntax. So take note of that. Now that is it. You can navigate through your phpMyAdmin given this time, and until next episode we're going to create a database using both the command line and also the graphical user interface. So stay tuned. If you have any question that you think you want to ask me with regards to MySQL or phpMyAdmin, the comment section is always available. You can find us on our social media networks, as you can see on the screen. Don't hesitate, by the way, feel free to interact with us. Our numbers are also on the screen. You can always call us whenever you want. And also remember that we run a digital marketing agency that will help you develop web applications, as well as help improve their online presence by doing search engine optimization, running your social media marketing campaigns and all that. So in case you need help, or your organization needs help, or your brand needs help, kindly feel free to contact us. But until next time, it's always kudos!